If you carry a firearm and discharge your weapon in self-defense, you could face hundreds of thousands of dollars in legal fees and expenses. So carry the protection of CCW Safe, Self-Defense Legal Services membership. Upfront payment of all criminal and civil defense costs with no out-of-pocket for members. Unlimited defense budgets, unmatched legal expertise. Carry the same level of support police officers have. Carry CCW Safe, the highest caliber.
And we are back with a special episode with a couple of us in person for a change. Yep. In case y'all are wondering, that is the one and the only Mike Sterling, Mad Bomber.
What's going on, people?
John Wheaton and Dave Kemper on their way here. We've got an awesome day planned tomorrow at WAFT, where our families train. Of course, joined by Jeff MD, our in-house CIA operative, and Randy Nance, former Green Beret, good friend of mine from back home in Texas. So tonight we're going to cut through a bunch of lies and propaganda surrounding one of the most devastating attacks on women's rights in our lifetime. And so we're going to dive deep into keeping males out of female sports with no BS, just the straight up facts, the real science behind it. Before we dive into that, quick reminder, if you visit survivaldispatchnews.com, it'll take you to our Substack. And you can grab a Guardian membership there for only $7.99 a month or $75 a year. You get 2.5 months for free. That works out to 21 cents per day. It's a pretty good deal. Benefits include Survival Dispatch emergency notifications, full daily sit rep 6 days a week, early access to content, 37 survival e-mags, the Sunday Threat Matrix email newsletter, and access to our high traffic private signal chat. So join to stay informed so you can protect your family, America, and protect Christianity. And at the very least, if you don't sign up for a paying membership, sign up for a free account so you get our Saturday Watch Guide, which is a list of everything we publish for the week up until then, thumbnails, links, descriptions. And that way you'll never miss an episode because you didn't get a notification. No notifications for new content is basically the number one method big tech uses to suppress us and other people who cut against their narrative. All right, main topic, keeping males out of female sports. So what we're witnessing across America isn't about inclusion or compassion. It's about the systemic destruction of women's sports and the erasure of biological reality itself. When we allow biological males to compete against our daughters, we're not just stealing their trophies and scholarships. We're telling them that their dreams don't matter, their safety is expendable, and their very identity as women is meaningless. This isn't a political issue. This is a biblical one. God created us, male and female, for a reason. That divine design isn't subject to human opinion, no matter how loudly the left screams about it. As Christian conservatives, we have a duty to defend the truth that's written into every cell of our bodies. We're not just protecting sports, we're protecting the foundation of biological reality that our civilization depends on. And the stakes couldn't be higher. When we surrender women's sports to biological males, we're surrendering our daughters' futures. We're teaching our children that feelings matter more than facts, that men can simply declare themselves women and take whatever they want. This is the hill that we die on, because if we don't stop this madness here, where does it end? So I'm going to go to everybody here and get your high-level thoughts on mentally ill men screwing up women's sports. Mike, I'll go to you first.
I mean, I'm already a mentally ill guy, and I tell you, I don't understand any of this part. I mean, as far as when we were growing up, it wasn't, yeah, you were trying to get into women's sports. Guys like us were trying to get into the women's sports locker room. Okay. We were doing this crazy stuff. This is wild. If you're lousy at a sport, have the stones to be able to look at yourself and go, okay, I suck at this sport. I'm not good at this. I'm going to just, go ahead and take the L and move on, as opposed to, well, in order to win, I'm going to find a different league and beat out a bunch of women doing it. So yeah, that's just dumb. I don't know.
It's insane. Jeff, We'll get your opinion next.
Well, yeah, I mean, as the father of a daughter, some guy was playing volleyball against my daughter and spiked her in the face and knocked her down and gave her brain damage like that one poor girl. I tell you, I would not be too kind on that. And it's, and some people generally think they're being, empathetic to the transgender folks, but it's like, the Reverend said the other night, it's the sin of empathy. You need to have compassion, but that means, hey, dude, you're a dude. You don't jump into, you don't reinforce their gender dysmorphia, their mental illness. And you sure as hell don't make innocent girls who know they are girls and want to compete against girls pay the price for some mediocre male athlete deciding he wants to be reinforced by winning a medal or a trophy he doesn't deserve. I mean, this is beyond. This makes participation trophies look like an Olympic gold medal, for crying out loud.
Great. Yeah, it's pretty bad. Randy, when you're giving us your opinion, if you don't mind, just to mention the stuff you mentioned before we went online with the guy in California, I think it was.
Well, yeah, I'm in agreement with everybody here. It's pretty crazy. We just watched a guy in the state of California win 2 of the state medals in track. Track and field's a pretty difficult, that's not the easiest sport to be in. Those people have to work hard to get where they are. And to think you're just going to let a guy come in there and take 2 state titles from the women's division. When we go back to the guy, I don't remember his name, because I don't remember any of his name. There's no point. But he beat Riley Gaines, right? And he was now a collegiate swimmer. But when he was in male, where he should be, he was like ranked 400 and something.
Mm-hmm.
400 and something. So he's not even going to be swimming in college. That's the truth of the matter. But if he just turns into a girl or pretends to be a girl, all of a sudden that makes it okay. And now this guy wins a national championship. That's the difference we're talking about. The dude where he's supposed to be, 400th something. But we go ahead and throw him in the mix with all the women, and he wins the national title. The top girl in the country.
You're right.
It's insanity, and people have to realize you ruin all your credibility when you start pushing this kind of narrative and this kind of stuff. You have no credibility. I don't care who you are. You start, and I'm going somewhere else. I'm listening to somebody else because you're not worth my time.
Jeff, did you want to add to that?
No, I was just saying he was right the first time when he said he.
Yes.
One of the things we need to do is quit reinforcing the BS with the pronouns. The kid in question, I think, is A.B. Hernandez or A something Hernandez. He's a dude. He's a guy, and we need to refer to him as him. They call it misgendering. It's not. It's properly gendering. He is misgendering himself.
Yeah.
Well, Jeff, what do you think? Should we? I don't understand where the part. Hey, if this guy wants to pretend he's a princess, then so be it. But why do the rest of us have to be forced to play along with him?
Well, yeah, and I always say the example is if I could think that I'm the King of England, well, that doesn't mean you have to call me Your Majesty.
That's right.
We won't anyway.
Wasn't there a guy on The Walking Dead did that, basically declared himself to be the king of some fictitious town? But before we move on, I've got Trump's executive order pulled up, but there was a recent study, and you guys just tweaked me on it. I probably should have pulled it up for tonight. And it basically said that females who think they are a male are suffering true body dysmorphia. It's the actual mental illness. And that males who declare that they are females, some of them are dysmorphia, but most of them are sexual deviants who get off wearing women's clothes. And so these are 2 totally different things for the most part, which is kind of interesting. And it also speaks to not allowing them to be around our youngins. And 2018, the World Health Organization took body dysmorphia, transgenderism off its list of mental illnesses. And that's when the floodgates got open. And I agree with Randy. So I think Jeff and I have discussed this before, where I said, at the very least, this is like psychopathy or sociopathy. And now we're being asked to participate in that psychopathy.
Yeah.
And that's crossing a serious line. So anyway, let's pull up Donald Trump's executive order on this, keeping men out of women's sports. And the text is a little bit small on this page. I'll zoom in a bit for anybody who wants to read it on their own, but I'm just going to kind of hit some of the highlights here. These are the exact words of the EO, by the way. By the authority vested in me as president by the Constitution and laws of the United States of America, and to protect opportunities for women and girls to compete in safe and fair sports, it is hereby ordered, Section 1, Policy and Purpose. In recent years, many educational institutions and athletic associations have allowed men to compete in women's sports. This is demeaning, unfair, and dangerous to women and girls, and denies women, and girls the equal opportunity to participate and excel in competitive sports. Moreover, under Title IX of the Education Amendments Act of 1972, educational institutions receiving federal funds cannot deny women an equal opportunity to participate in sports. As some federal courts have recognized, ignoring fundamental biological truths between the two sexes deprives women and girls of meaningful access to educational facilities. Therefore, it is the policy of the United States to rescind all funds from educational programs that deprive women and girls of fair athletic opportunities, which results in the endangerment, humiliation, and silencing of women and girls and deprives them of privacy. It shall also be the policy of the United States to oppose male competitive participation in women's sports more broadly as a matter of safety. So I've got some different questions here, Randy. I'm going to come to you first. I have to assume, we haven't discussed this, but I have to assume that you're in favor of dismantling the Department of Education, that we were number one in the world in a whole bunch of measurements. You know, Jimmy Carter brings us the Department of Education, and all of a sudden the wheels come off. Now we're number 40. Here, everything has a cost, right? The first thing you do is decide what you want. The next thing you do is decide what you're willing to give up to get it. So Trump already threatened Newsom and said, you know what, we're not going to send you funds if you do this. And California very quietly changed their laws to accommodate Trump's executive order. But if we abolish the Department of Education, we don't have that particular stick to, hold over them anymore. It's a bit of a juxtaposition there. So I'm curious what your thoughts are on how you reconcile that.
Well, I have, I'm not well versed in how the federal and the state governments interact with each other in that way, but I guarantee you there's another way. Just because we don't have the Department of Education doesn't mean there won't be another way that you can put the squeeze on them. I guarantee there's probably at least 100, maybe 1,000 different ways to do that. Because I firmly believe it's time for them to go. The Department of Education, to me, now looking at the results they've had, just because it was Jimmy Carter, right? So it hadn't even been around that long. And look at the damage it's already done. Was it like the Ministry of Truth? You know what I mean? It's not really the Department of Education. It's the Department of Uneducation. Because as we talked about in a recent panel, look at our kids, they're not even learning how to cursive write anymore. They can't even read it. Mm-hmm. And that, accesses other parts of the brain. That's why it's important to be literate. To be able to read and write is a big deal. And not just be able to text, some unorthodox sentence that is allowable in texting. That's not intelligence, right? So I don't know. I think that there's plenty of ways that the federal government, if a state isn't playing along, would be able to force them to do so if they felt justified in doing that.
So Jeff, I'll come to you next. I just want to preface it by saying, I think another time you and I had a conversation on how we built the richest, most sophisticated country / economy in the world, and our education system has failed our children, and they're no longer at the level necessary to maintain an advanced society. I mean, we went to Jimmy Hula's a couple weeks ago, and we were ordering some tacos before we went to the beach, and there was a girl being trained on the cash, and you could tell she was getting flustered, and she finally turned around to her manager and she said, I can't find jalapenos under H. And, Cindy and I are both looking at it thinking, wow, you know, this poor girl's been robbed of an education. She was probably like 16, 17 years old. Just a stupid anecdotal example, but Jeff, can we crawl out of this hole?
Well, we got to get rid of the Department of Education, but that doesn't mean all the funding goes away. You know, Congress will still, they'll still set money aside for education. It just what they were talking about is a lot of the money that goes to the states will go directly to the states and not be filtered through the DOE. And they, it's because they for years have done. If you do what we tell you to do, we'll give you funds. My parents were both teachers, educators, and drove my mom nuts because there's always strings attached. Well, we get rid of the DOE and we still give them some of the money, but you still got to follow Title IX. And if you don't follow Title IX, you're not going to get the block grant that you would have gotten otherwise. Yeah. And that's what you have to do. You really have to hold their feet to the fire and cut off their funds. California thinks, we'll just do it. We'll just go our own. Yeah, wait till you have to pay the full freight. No, you won't.
And they already have a huge deficit from illegals, of course. But Mike, we'll go to you next. I appreciate you manning the YouTube feed, but I'll switch over to you here. No problem. Just really simple question, Mike. Can we crawl out of this hole? And if so, how the heck do we do it?
Well, I keep on seeing a mountain of similarities with the movie Idiocracy here. And if we all wind up wearing Crocs and, clothing that you pull out of a box, we're just going to have to wait for this guy named Not Sure to come and dig us out of it, because people are just progressively getting stupider. Can we? Yes. I think small schooling and homeschooling are really going to be the key to this whole thing. The masses, I hate to say it this way. This is going to sound extremely, extremely Marxist, but the masses are just going to continue being ignorant because it's more fun to be ignorant. And
it's because you don't know, Mike.
Right. Yeah, exactly. And I think we're in a situation now where we're just going to have, we're going to have to just dig all on our own, and it's going to be a grind, and that's all there is to it. Welcome back to, a new version of the Dark Ages, but in this case, it's not caused by Visigoths in the Catholic Church.
Learning is hard, and people don't want to do hard things.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, true story.
Yeah.
So I would just end on this executive order by saying it's, as far as I know, the first serious federal action to protect biological women from the transgender ideology it's absolutely devastated girls' athletics. I can't remember precisely when, but it's probably been about 4 years ago. My wife can confirm this. I started saying, you know what? All the girls should stop participating in sanctioned events, go have their own unsanctioned events, and let all the mental cases compete against each other, and don't validate it by even showing up for it. So
that's right.
Yeah.
And I think this goes way beyond sports too. This is defending women's rights. Like, I can't believe that woke progressive women on the left are all in favor of essentially committing genocide, self-inflicted genocide. So I don't know. I guess we'll see what happens with the big stick the feds have money-wise, and whether or not that will actually change anything. Hopefully it will. All right.
Suicide is normally self-inflicted.
Right.
Well, and California can keep going. I know there's a fair amount of people in the country now that'd rather just build a wall to leave California with Mexico. We'll just cut them off.
Arizona.
Build the wall. That's right. Just build the wall.
Right.
No, see, here's where you're wrong. So what we do, right, is you go ahead and you let California become their own nation, right?
Yeah.
And you let Oregon and Washington, the coastal portions of Oregon and Washington, do the same thing, right? And then you give Mexico tacit approval to go ahead and take them over, right? They move in. The second that they move in, right, then we move back in, take it all over again, only give them territory rights. We don't give them the rights of states.
Yeah.
Voila. Mike is a problem solver. Clearly.
I am here to fix things, man. Now, my fixes may be stupid, but it's a fix.
Well, you're gonna want to apply some of your fixes to this next one here. So, before we get into all of the science on the right side of this topic, I figured we'd have a look at the other side. So, this is an article from the ACLU called "The 4 Myths About Trans Athletes Debunked." Many who oppose the inclusion of trans athletes erroneously claim that allowing trans athletes to compete will harm women. This divide and conquer tactic gets it exactly wrong. Excluding women who are trans hurts all women. It invites gender policing that could subject any woman to invasive tests or accusations of being too masculine or too good at their sport to be a real woman.
Or too East German.
Right. Women, including women who are transgender, intersex, or disabled, have a range of different physical characteristics. A person's genetic makeup and internal, external reproductive anatomy are not useful indicators of athletic performance, according to Dr. Joshua D. Safer. For a trans woman athlete who meets NCAA standards, there is no inherent reason why her physiological characteristics related to athletic performance should be treated differently from the physiological characteristics of a non-transgender woman. In Connecticut, where real girl runners have tried to block Andrea from participating in the sport she loves, the very same girls who have claimed the trans athletes have an unfair advantage have consistently performed as well or better than the transgender competitors. Well, I'm familiar with what's gone down in Connecticut, and that's not true. No. That's just a straight up, flat out lie. But Mike, I'll go to you first. I'll switch over to your camera here. This is the typical tactic from the left, where they say something and say that's the science, and therefore it can't be questioned. But science should always be questioned, of course.
Yeah.
It's never settled. There's no such thing as settled science. It's always evolving. But
last I checked, there's this thing called, what was it? Oh, yeah, the scientific method.
But this goes beyond that, in that these people like to basically say, this is the way it is. And if you disagree, you're a racist Nazi and you're wrong because we're right.
I guess I'm a racist Nazi and you are a delusional knucklehead. And we're going to look at your bank accounts and we're going to see exactly how much they paid you for this. What was it that we were talking about earlier, where, you know, we determine that credibility, if you do any of this stuff, your credibility goes. Yeah. And that's where we're at right here. Credibility going to hell.
All right. So I'm going to give this one to you. And then I think there's a couple more subtitles in here that I'll give to Randy and Jeff, but this is fact. It's a fact. There's no question. It's a fact.
Well, then hell, I have to believe it now.
Fact. Including trans athletes will benefit everyone. Myth. The participation of trans athletes hurts. I'm not saying CIS or cis women baloney. This is a made up term. I call them real women. So the participation of trans athletes hurts real women is a myth.
Well, you know, honestly, I've got to disagree with that because their penis gets in the way.
Well, that depends on who we're talking about. Do you remember that guy from somewhere in the Middle East who won the Olympic gold boxing medals?
Morocco, I think.
Yeah, so he's had all of his stuff stripped away from him, not from the Olympics, but some other boxing federation. And I mean, I wouldn't have read it, but it was the title of the freaking article that it was confirmed that he indeed had a micro penis.
Well, Mike has one of those.
Hey, I can't help it. I'm Scottish.
Oh, my
God. He was in the pool.
You owe me $20 for setting you up with that, Jeff.
Don't you oppress me, Jeff. See you in August.
All right. So, Randy, I want to hear your thoughts on rebuttal here against the ACLU's baloney, and then I'll come up to the next sub headline for you after you give us the high level.
Yeah, I've never liked the ACLU for many reasons, as we all know, but aren't they attorneys? I mean, aren't these people educated? They have professional degrees, right? I mean, It makes no sense. You're going to try to tell people this kind of stuff. How can you do that with a straight face is all I want to know, and think that this is legitimate. There is nothing legitimate about this. There is nothing legitimate about this. Even if it is a micro penis, he's still a man. That's a reality. He's still a man. He still has testosterone. And, but also you look at it just like the other day when we were talking about the 9/11, that topic. This is the same thing. Any topic that they come out and tell you what it is, but you can't question it, they're lying. Why? Because no one cares if you question the truth, do they? Because no matter how or how many times you break her to boil it down, it still comes out the truth. It's only when it's not the truth that all of a sudden no one can question it. That's why.
Yeah. So, Jeff, I want to hear your thoughts, and then I'm going to quickly pivot elsewhere. There's been an attack in Boulder, Colorado, and I caught it in our chat. Thank you. I can't remember who the first person was who said it, but thank you, whoever pointed out. But Jeff, your thoughts on this in particular. Trans athletes do not have an unfair advantage in sports, and it's a myth that trans athletes' physiological characteristics provide an unfair advantage.
It's 100% gaslighting. You're standing outside, there's water falling from the sky, you're soaked to the skin, and they're trying to tell you it ain't raining. Well,
forces.
This is, and it's not even something that is up for debate. Everybody knows there are differences between men and women, and when it comes to physical strength and stamina, men have the advantage. They have for hundreds of thousands of years, millions of years. This is not something that's up for debate. And they're trying to say, not only is it not up for debate, we've all been wrong for 1 million years, literally, and that's not up for debate. Bullshit.
So depending on whose numbers you want to believe, there's a ton of studies out there that show that the average male is somewhere between 30 and 50% stronger than the average female. That would probably apply to us Gen Xers and those who came before us. I don't know that applies to the younger generation, where you've got 20-year-old kids now have less testosterone than a 70-year-old man had at the turn of the century.
Well, you do have David Hogg.
Well, yeah. I mean, what caliber of barrel do you think you could clean with those arms of his?
0.17.
Yeah, it's a 177 BB.
Yeah.
Sounds about right. Okay, so I want to pivot here quickly to tell you what we've found so far, and we'll keep an eye on this throughout this evening's podcast. But Nick Sordor is always on top of stuff. Breaking and attack has just occurred on a pro-Israel protest in Boulder, Colorado. This is breaking news, by the way. Initial reports suggest Molotov cocktails were used, and there are multiple casualties, including children. Video from the scene shows fires burning. Massive response currently underway. And it doesn't look like there's any more on this post. 41-second video. I'm going to play the whole thing. This is the first time we've seen this as well.
Stay.
All right, so that's the end of that video from Nick, and we'll keep looking out for more information. For those of you who are in the live chat, if you find anything of note, do me a favor and put the link in the live chat, whatever platform you're on, comes to our interface here on StreamYard, and we'll try sneak a look or two on our own as well to see what else we can determine before we carry on. So picking back up where we left off, here's another article of the same angle. So trans women in sports, debunking the myth of a competitive advantage. And I just want to preface this by saying, how they can even suggest that they're debunking, because if you look at men's and women's world records in any sport over the years, it's not even a competition. It's not even close. So anyway, Jeff, I'll go to you first on this if you have anything else to add. I'm off got off kilter here now because of the attack, but let's go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say, you're right about the world records. You look at you look at the 100-yard dash, you look at track and field, you look at any of the kind of records, you look at weightlifting, you look at anything like that. The men's records are just way above the women's records. In fact, the women's Olympic records in track and field for speed, for times and distances jumped and things like that are routinely beat in the United States by high school and junior high school male athletes.
True.
The fastest woman in the world would be a guy in high school.
What was Serena, the tennis player, Serena Williams?
Oh yeah, Serena Williams.
She got her ass kicked by a guy who was ranked 470th or something in the world.
And she's beefy. She's
a
big girl.
She comes out and says, so they said, how would you do against Andy Riddick? And she goes, he'd win 6-0, 6-0. She goes, he's got too much power and too much speed. All men do. And she was very honest about it.
Yeah.
And she dominated that sport as a woman. Dominated that sport.
But
absolutely.
She admits women tennis players cannot compete against, even the 300th in the world male guys. It just isn't going to happen.
So, Randy, speak to this part here. There's no evidence of advantage, just evidence of exclusion. That's straight up fantasy.
That's what I said. These are like educated people, right, that are supposed to be writing this paper. I was thinking about this a minute ago, maybe not 20 years ago, but most of my life, this thing no one would even ever publish this thing. They would have been too embarrassed to publish this. We don't, if we had a media, this wouldn't be happening, but we don't. And you remember there used to be a National Enquirer. There ain't even any one of those anymore because the media took over the National Enquirer's business.
Well, it's called the New York Times now.
That's right. It's called the New York Times. That's what this is. They're sitting here telling you bold-faced lies, expecting you to believe. Everybody knows there's evidence. We've just mentioned it. Everybody's been in sports. Everybody went to school. Even if you weren't in sports, you knew there was a difference between women and boys sports. And it doesn't even matter the sport. We can take tennis. We can take golf. They don't play football, but they are in soccer. Any sport that the women have, that men have, there is a disparity between the men's records and what they do on the average as opposed to what women do. And there's nothing wrong with that. It's how it is. But when you start trying to ship men down there, and, like we said a minute ago, the guy that won the national title and beat Riley out was 400th and something ranked in men's swimming, but he won the national title. That's how big of a difference it is. It's not even close.
The women's national soccer team, which were the reigning world champions of women's soccer, lost badly to a men's soccer team that was from a prep school in Dallas, Texas, 15-year-olds. The world champion women's got their asses handed to them by a bunch of 15-year-old boys from suburban Dallas.
Hey, but there's no evidence, Jeff.
There's no
none
evidence
out there.
None.
I would say one of the very few exceptions would be long distance swimming, because even the leanest female athletes typically have a higher percentage of body fat than men do, and male athletes in particular. So if you don't have high body fat, you're not very buoyant. And long distance swimming is one of those rare things where it kind of slants in their favor. But Mike, I'll let you take a swing at this, and then I've got another update on Colorado.
I'm almost speechless by a lot of this stuff, and honestly, the guys have beat this horse to death. But this is suicide. This is all just suicide. And any so-called intellectual who gloms onto this, the first thing that I gotta ask is how much are they paying you? And if they're not paying you, then let's sit you down with a shrink and talk to you. Now, I will say though that your pup here has told me that she identifies as a snack inspector.
Right.
And I have to believe that because that's established science.
Yes, it is actually. She eats anything. It's too funny. So entertain me here for a second. So we know that China decided to wage a asymmetrical irregular warfare against us starting in 1949. We also know that the Chinese, the Iranians, North Koreans know that they can't land on our shores and win a kinetic battle here. But this particular topic of transgenderism has taken people like me, and now there's no olive branch, there's no reconciliation. I'm not reconciling with anybody who idiotically believes any of this stuff whatsoever. Well, at that point in time, when everybody hits that particular threshold, we are a nation divided, and that weakens us tremendously. So on some level, I want to think that that's kind of what part of this is. Do any of you want to weigh in on that before we move on? I'll take that as a no. All right. So there's been a guy arrested here. Breaking the terrorist behind the Boulder, Colorado attack has been identified as Mohammed Solomon. Let's be clear. The pro-Palestinian movement is not a protest movement. It's a terror movement. So I'm kind of checking in between when y'all are speaking to tonight's main topic, but that's what we've got so far. We'll share more with you as we find it.
Jeff, you're killing me, man. These ACLU lawyers are the children of the 1950s doctors who insisted that cigarettes were good for you.
Yeah, right. All right.
I'm totally shocked that this guy his name is Suleiman. I am.
Who would have thought, huh?
Yeah, and I'm also shocked that there's gambling going on here. So
shocked, I say. Shocked.
Yeah, no kidding. All right, moving on to the next article from The Guardian here. California changes high school sports rule after Trump post over trans athlete. After backlash from Trump's Truth Social post, California quietly modified its rule book to avoid further political heat. The rule change, though subtle, is a signal that pressure works. In essence, the article focuses on a specific situation in California involving a transgender athlete's unfair success. The resulting controversy in the California Interscholastic Federation's attempt to address concerns while upholding California law, which allows transgender students to compete on teams consistent with their gender identity. So it kind of puts them between a rock and a hard place as far as I can tell. Randy, I'll go to you first, because we already kind of alluded to this particular topic, but the money stick works.
Yeah, it always does. Certainly when you're talking about government agencies and entities, you know what I mean? They need money to operate. And so that's how you get to them. And certainly these state governments, California isn't any different. It thinks it is, but it's not. And, they can keep doing all the stuff they want. But at the end of the day, it's not being fair to all the girls in their state. That's a fact. You're going to let boys come in there and play in the sports, then what's the point of having men and women's sports? Well, we know why we know the point. As we've mentioned several times already, there's a big difference between men and women in athletic ability and what they can do. It's just because we've gotten so far in time that, at this time and date, that something like this could even be looked at. Like we're saying now, how do they even have any credibility left? How's everybody not laughed them off the stage and this is over? I don't know. It's pretty crazy that this thing seems to have legs coming from nowhere, when we've also noticed through Doge that, apparently we were spreading this message all over the planet. It didn't organically grow. Somebody was making this happen.
That's right.
So, it's time for somebody to put a stop to it too. That's a fact.
All right. So, Jeff, I'll go to you next, and I want to pull up. I don't know if you noticed on the side of that last article, there was this post. Newsom condemned for throwing trans people under bus after sport comment. Democratic California governor faces backlash after saying trans women playing in female sports was deeply unfair. and he's being thrown under the bus for saying this guy's a creep. But
he's trying to run for president, and he's trying to dance, on both sides of the fence, and he can't do it. But he accidentally did the right thing, but it'll come back and bite him in the butt because they don't want to do the right thing. What amazes me is that, okay, if you had an NBA guy and he got cut by his team and no one else wanted to pick him up, and he decided, I'm going to re-enter high school, I'm going to enroll as a sophomore, and then I'm going to go out for the basketball team, and I'm just going to completely dominate the city, schools. People would go, what the hell is this, man? That's insane. You can't do that. But this is the exact same thing. Instead of being age related, it is sex related.
right.
And so explain to me the difference. If you're going to allow male athletes to compete against female athletes, why aren't 25-year-olds allowed to compete against 15-year-olds? Explain the difference to me. At least they can use the same shower and not have to worry about, throwing your junk to the opposite sex.
Right. But Mike, you've spent a good chunk of your life in California. Your thoughts on Gavin Newsom making a comment that it's deeply unfair now his core constituents throwing him under the bus because
That guy
anti-alphabet.
That guy has always been a political windsock. He blows the direction that will get him votes. That's it. That man has not got a single solitary thing that he stands on other than him. Period. The man is an absolute narcissist.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. It's like, what do you think? What do you want me to think?
Right.
Well, I'm questioning who's the backlash from? Are you talking about all the people in the media there
No.
in California? I know
No.
it wasn't most of the citizens. That's probably not true.
Alphabet people.
Yeah, that's exactly who.
Oh, that's essentially what it says. The
Yeah.
alphabet people
Well,
just losing their shit over it.
This is the fallout for all those USAID workers that don't have a job anymore.
Yeah.
They're looking for something to do.
And to be fair, I'm not a Newsom fan either. I can't stand the guy. But, I just want to know where all the backlash is because he said something that was true for once.
Yeah, I agree with Mike. I mean, Mike's followed Gavin Newsom longer than I have, but he's very opportunistic as far as I can see.
Oh,
yeah.
So,
And I don't think he's been duly elected. I'm sure that's been arranged.
Oh yeah.
I do not disagree with that one bit, Randy. That's actually, we should probably cover California in an entire episode because the vast majority of people I know in California are conservatives.
Yeah.
And I'll give you a really crazy example before we move on. Is if you think anybody thinks that Dianne Feinstein was elected to office for over 50 years and never had one single campaign event,
Yeah.
then I got some oceanfront property in Arizona.
You're not kidding.
And,
Yeah. Such a dirtbag.
Well, it's the Brown, Getty, Pelosi, cabal.
Yeah.
Those families have been running that state forever.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, 100%. So I got another update or a couple updates here on the situation in Colorado. So it's kind of interesting that 2 days ago, Laura Loomer said, get ready for another 9/11. And then this guy here is the police chief in Boulder, contradicting FBI Director Kash Patel, says he is not yet calling it a terrorist attack, which was carried out by someone shouting pro-Palestinian rhetoric to pro-Israel demonstrators. It's Islamic terrorism. If it walks like a duck and it quacks like a duck, it's a duck. But let's listen to this soy boy here and see how he justifies his statement.
FBI is already calling it a targeted terror attack. Would you also refer to it as a terror attack?
So I've been in contact with our local FBI multiple times. So we are in contact with them here. We're not calling it a terror attack at this point. Again, it's way too early to speculate motive. I know there's a lot out there on social media, but I ask people just to give us a little bit of patience while we work through a really complex scene. A lot of witnesses were here. We've taken them to another location to debrief them and interview them. As we do that, I think the picture will become more clear. But it would be irresponsible for me to speculate on motive this early on. We're only a couple hours into this thing.
All right, so I got to say this right off the bat before you all weigh in on this as well. Any guy who stands there like this is a flamer. And that's definitely the case in Boulder.
What's
And-
Boulder?
Yeah.
He plays in women's sports.
The San Francisco of the Rockies.
Yeah. I'll leave it at that. Does anybody want to weigh in on this guy's lunacy, or have we said enough?
Okay. Free Palestine, Allah Akbar, none of those are actual evidence of anything at all. You know,
Zero.
It's
Zero.
a Kevin Bacon moment.
Nothing to see here. Nothing to see.
Totally a Kevin Bacon moment.
Yes.
Remain calm. All is well. Remain calm.
So are you telling me that the religionofpeace.com, which has been out there for about 20 years tracking this stuff, is not truthful?
I'm going to
goodness.
tell you exactly what's going on. I'm mad because I got to go and change the sign that says days since our last attack by an Islamic whack job. And now I've got to take the numbers off and I'm going to change it to a 0 again.
what was it before? A 1?
I want to say it was like 1.5, but I
Okay.
get mad every time I
Just
have to
leave
change
the
it.
0 up there. Just save
I-
yourself the work.
I don't like having to change the numbers, man.
Well, you don't have to. We get one every day, so
Just leave the 0.
The 0 makes me mad.
Too funny. We got a short message from our new sponsor, Carnival. I'll explain it after we play this short video. We'll be right back.
Make great meals anytime with Carnival.
So first off, I want to thank the guys at Carnival for working with us to promote their new company. So their meats are 100% American, no mRNA fed to any of the animals. They are grass finished, not just grass fed. Grass fed means that the last few weeks they bulked them up by giving them grain full of all sorts of crap. So it's high quality, and their product suits a bunch of different markets. So number one, you can stack it up, in case there's some calamity like a hurricane that takes things out, like Hurricane Helene, and you've got extra food kicking around. And as you saw, you can just pour hot water in it from a thermos and reconstitute it. Mike and I were talking earlier. One of the cool things when you rehydrate, when you dehydrate meat and then you rehydrate it, you can put your own flavoring in and it will absorb it like a sponge. It's nothing like marinating meat is at all. You got people who just eat carnivore diet, like my wife. She subsists on steak, bacon, and butter. And anybody who's seen her knows she's in fantastic shape. And
what's she doing with you?
I have
we all wonder that.
I have no idea. It's clearly not my good luck.
Understandable.
Right?
Yes.
So anyway,
We all live there, pal.
He's sneaking the snacks. That's what it is.
the other thing is my wife was in a really bad wreck and broke her neck, and her sister broke her neck in the car wreck, and her sister took the injections in her neck, and she has very limited range of motion in her neck and wishes she'd never done it. My wife didn't do it. And when she switched over to carnivore, all the pain went away because the good natural fats add a lot of lubricity. Golly, say that 3 times fast. So it's helped out a lot there. The other thing is time's the most valuable commodity in the world. It's the only thing you can't buy or replace. So the convenience economy now is in full swing. Do I want to go to a website and order stuff for it to show up here, or do I want to drive somewhere, fight for a parking spot, fight the crowds, find out that the store doesn't have exactly what I want? I don't shop. I hate shopping in person. Everything I do is online. Anyway, you're going to hear more about Carnival. There's a lot of stuff to it, but there's no chemicals. There's no flavoring. You can flavor it the way that you want. High quality stuff. If you go to their website, carnival.com, there's a coupon there that gets you 10% off. And we've got more of it coming to us this week. So we'll actually show you what we came up with cooking wise and not just the commercial from those guys.
I know. I'm looking forward to it.
I'm really looking forward to it, to be honest with you. That's really good stuff. All right, moving on to the next one, tonight's topic. A little bit disjointed because of the situation in Colorado, but we shall do our best. So this one here, let me make sure I've got the right article pulled up. So this is our governor here, Ron DeSantis, of course. Such a, I don't know, I'm very ambivalent over him. He's, on the whole, he's done a pretty good job for us here in Florida. But the fact that he was seduced by Paul Ryan and other WEF globalists to run against Trump, and the fact that his wife Casey thinks she's going to be our next governor, she will not be our next governor. Byron Donalds will be. You can take that to the bank. Makes me, again, very ambivalent towards him. But here's another one that he got right. So our law here was one of the first ones to restore sanity to school athletics. And it essentially started a wave of similar efforts across the nation to protect female competition. It's funny, we didn't have lockdowns here in Florida. And so we didn't have any firsthand experience with it, and just kind of relied on what y'all went through in other states where they were locked down. The same applies to this transgender stuff. We just don't have it here. It's not allowed. So we're kind of sheltered in a good way, I would say. Anyway, this article basically provides a snapshot of emerging legal battles, and the debates that go around it. There shouldn't be a debate, but there is, and that's kind of what the whole point of tonight's episode is. And I think that the way we beat this, because I asked the question earlier and y'all had great ideas, is at the state level. It just like Roe v. Wade and abortion, let the states handle it. That's the way the forefathers always anticipated or foresaw how things should operate, right? Very small central federal government, look after borders, national defense, those sort of things. But all the other stuff, give it to the states. Let the states look after it. I can tell you in other countries, I'll use Canada as an example. The east coast of Canada, the maritime provinces, they're called, they're not terribly sophisticated from an economic standpoint. So they get these things called transfer payments. So you take a really rich province like Alberta, who has a lot of money that they generate. They give it to the Canadian federal government, and then the federal government gives most of it to the other provinces that aren't doing so well economically. And without going too far down this rabbit hole, I would posit that anytime you take a group of people, especially a large group of people, and you give them subsidies and assistance and freebies and so on and so forth, you create a culture of dependency, and they never seem to be able to dig their way out of it. And that's what's been happening in some states, much like it's been happening in Canada. And it's just another reason the state should have control, because then they have all the incentive in the world to do things, to actually be productive, to actually be merit-based. So Jeff, what's the situation in Arizona with transgenders, men and women's sports?
We've got the Republicans are in control of the House and the Senate, and the governor is Katie Hobbs, who's a Weasley Democrat. Anytime that they try to codify this, she ends up vetoing it, and they don't have enough to override her veto. As far as I know, there aren't a lot of issues with trans in sports, but then I don't really follow a lot of local, high school sports here. And at the collegiate level, I haven't heard too much about it either. Of course, they have to play by the NCAA's rules. But again, we've got a conservative legislature, and so I think the friction between the legislature and the governor keep anything from happening one way or the other. So in some sense, no news is good news.
I appreciate that. Randy, what's the situation in Texas with this stuff right now?
I'm like Jeff, I don't really hear a lot about it. We have a Republican governor that does a pretty decent job, although with Islam and some other things in mosques that are going on in Texas now, they're not doing a very good job. So I'm kind of ambivalent with mine as well. You kind of got to take the good with the bad. I guess nobody's perfect. But I was looking at that document, and as we've been talking about this past hour, I look at it, when you have to put a word in front of women, trans women, it's not a woman. That's just a fact. So when you're having to put that in a legal document to convince everybody that this is okay, it's no wonder why other states followed suit with Florida. Why? Because everybody knows it's wrong. Everybody knows. And it's, we all wondered how Hitler in Germany happened. We're watching it right now. Maybe not we're killing people off, but we're watching stupidity at levels we've never seen before. And no one's doing anything about it. And this trans thing has gotten way out of hand, and them being allowed to compete in sports. I don't know what year that started, but how stupid was that? We should have never allowed that to start to begin with. But the fact that we're still having to do this and they're going to try to tell us that we're wrong, it's like Jeff said earlier, that's 100% gaslighting. They're telling you the exact lie, but telling you it's the truth and expect you to believe it. And then again, but don't question it either.
Yeah. Mike, you want to add anything from the Alabama perspective?
Come on, man. It's Alabama. We're even redder than Texas, if that's possible. Yeah,
I think y'all just ignored it, right?
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah, I think we've ignored the entire thing. Just like, no, that's something that they do over there in Atlanta, and we don't go there. So,
yeah, fair enough. All right, appreciate that, Mike. So I've got another update from the attack in Boulder, Colorado. This is the guy who actually did it. Obviously, I have not had a chance to listen to it. But after trying to burn Jews alive in Boulder, Colorado today, Mohammed Solomon ranted about children being killed and until Palestine is free. You read that right. He firebombed Jews, then played the victim. This is the twisted ideology of Palestinianism. Attack Jews, then cry about it. Commit terror, then claim it's justice. Jihad isn't just across the ocean, it's in America. Are you paying attention? 46 seconds? Yeah, 46-second video. I'm going to play the whole thing.
We're here. We can't do nothing about that. We can't do nothing. We can't. Not here. Not here, bro. Not here. Right now.
He was wearing orange suit with like something on the back.
Spraying alcohol.
Spraying alcohol, but with he made it look like he was here.
He's making noise.
And for us,
Well, we can't do it when he's got Molotov cocktails in there.
if you have nothing, you have to.
That's what he's got right here. Is Molotov. Right there.
So this is what happens when you have a state that is run by a bunch of left-wing wackos and annihilate gun rights. That guy should have been held at gunpoint and told to hit the ground or else before he unleashed those Molotov cocktails. Unbelievable. Absolutely unbelievable.
yeah, that guy gets T-zoned.
Yeah, I was just thinking it wasn't too many years ago this guy would have been shot dead right there.
Well, if he was in Florida, he probably would, because you can use your concealed weapon to prevent a violent crime.
Correct.
Once he throws a Molotov cocktail, that's a violent crime, and just turn him off like a switch.
Yeah.
It actually, our law is even better than that. It's not just committed a violent crime. When your perception is that the bad guy is fixing to commit a heinous crime, at that point in time, you can step in and use deadly force. This guy should have been taken out. That's all there is to it. But anyway, we'll move on from there. The next one up here is from Alliance Defending Freedom. Why male athletes who identify as transgender should not compete in women's sports. And there's a plethora of good, solid content out there on this topic. And so the question they ask is, should transgender athletes compete in women's sports? Here's why males will always have an advantage over females in athletics. So number one, biological differences create inherent advantages. ADF asserts that males possess inherent physical advantages over females due to biological differences such as greater height, weight, bone density, muscle mass, and higher rates of metabolizing energy. They argue that these advantages translate to greater athletic performance, including strength, speed, and jumping ability. the fact that this is even up for debate absolutely blows my mind. The next one, testosterone suppression doesn't negate advantages. They claim that even with testosterone suppression, males retain significant physical advantages, particularly if puberty has occurred before transitioning. So here's the thing. You still have more fast twitch muscle fibers, and you also have longer insertion tendons. Without diving too far down that hole, every origin and insertion tendon in the human body crosses a joint on each end. So in other words, the origin tendon for your bicep is back here on your scapula, so it anchors it. And the insertion tendon's down here on your forearm. Now, work with me here. It's not hard to understand the physics of this. If you have really long insertion tendons, it means it's way down here. It's closer to the load, the weight. It takes a whole lot less effort to do this than it does to try and move it with a short insertion tendon here. And these are proven physiological differences between men and women. Also, the bone density is a big deal in a lot of sports. So moving on to their last 3 points, fairness and safety concerns. ADF argues that allowing males to compete in women's sports creates unfair competition and poses potential safety risks, particularly in contact sports, like the girl who got hit in the face with the volleyball, as you mentioned, Jeff. They contend that it limits opportunities for female athletes, potentially impacting scholarships and recognition. Impact on women's sports. The organization suggests that allowing male athletes to compete in women's sports undermines the integrity of women's sports, potentially leading to a decline in female participation and a loss of opportunities, meaning lost scholarships, lost recognition for all the time that they put into train and improve themselves. And the last one, sex is real and matters. ADF emphasizes that sex is a real and significant factor in athletic competition and cannot be ignored. They believe that policy should reflect biological realities and protect the integrity of women's sports. So in essence, the ADF is right on the money that allowing male athletes to compete in women's sports undermines fairness, safety, equal opportunity for female athletes due to inherent biological differences and retained advantages, even with hormone therapy. So does anybody want to take a swing at this before we move on? Because we're past the hour now, which is fine in this particular case.
Yeah, I would just say, look at some of the greatest women in history in sports that we've had, from Babe Harris Dickerson all the way forward. Just think, if men would have been competing in their sports all this time, we wouldn't know any of those women. We would not know one of them because they wouldn't have any of those titles and they would not have won.
Martina Navratilova, one of the probably most athletic women of all time. And, it's still up for debate as to whether or not she was taking PEDs, performance enhancing drugs. She looked like she was. I can't say that unequivocally. But when even she comes out and says we can't compete against men, I suspect that that's a world-class female athlete who has taken PEDs and is flat out, we just can't compete on the same level as men. Good point, Randy, as far as we'd never know those women or their names. Jeff, do you want to take a swing at that?
Well, the only thing I'll say is about the whole hormone suppression thing. Yeah, you can suppress the testosterone later, but if they've already gone through puberty, that means they already have the muscle mass, they already have the bone density, and that doesn't go away. If you go through puberty as a male, you're a male. And you're going to have the body, and you may not have the muscle tone as much because you may end up being like a bit of a soy boy, but you're definitely going to still be stronger and have stronger bones than a woman.
Yeah, totally agree, Jeff. Mike, do you want to add anything?
Yes. In this situation, I believe that all animals are equal, although some animals are more equal than others. Now, aren't they? And that's exactly the backside of this entire thing.
That sounds like a George Orwell quote.
As a matter of fact, it is.
From Animal Farm. All right. So I've got another piece of information on the attack in Boulder, Colorado. This one's from Laura Loomer. Mohammed Solomon, the Muslim man who carried out the Islamic terrorist attack in Colorado today, appears to be an immigrant from Kuwait who recently arrived in the U.S. under Joe Biden's open border policies 2 years ago. He's been arrested. And let me see what the rest of this says. A professional profile for a man who has his same name and looks just like him, says he works in finance, digital marketing, and international financial reporting. He also appears to have at least one daughter who is studying in the United States in Colorado. He speaks English and Arabic. So I don't know what platform this came off of, LinkedIn or something like that, I assume.
Doesn't quite look like him, but I don't know.
Yeah, hard to say. Sharing the same name. Anyway, that's the latest piece that we have.
Well, he's definitely got color in his hair, so he'd have to be a lot younger if this is him when this picture was taken. His hair was white.
Yeah,
we were watching.
Yeah, I guess we'll see as it unfolds. Either way, the guy was yelling and screaming all the things that a terrorist would yell and scream about. So I don't think there's much up for debate, to be quite frank. All right, the next article up, again, I apologize for going a little bit long tonight, but with this situation in Boulder, we're trying to juggle things, do as best as we can. Raising girl athletes in a transgender world. And this particular article basically gives a Christian family framework for navigating these conversations. Prepare your children, spiritually, intellectually, for what they're going to face. So the Gospel Coalition, not just this article, expresses concern about the impact of transgender athletes, specifically transgender women competing in women's sports. The author argues that allowing transgender women to compete against real women is unfair due to biological differences that give transgender women an advantage. They frame the issue within a Christian worldview, emphasizing the belief that God created distinct male and female bodies, and that allowing transgender women to compete in women's sports undermines this divinely established order and disadvantages true female athletes. The article says CIS gender, whatever. I'm not using that crap. We'll call them real women. So this is interesting. The reason this article caught my eye was because they're essentially offering some guidance to parents on how you navigate this type of a topic with your young daughters and young children. And kids don't come with a instruction manual, right? So sometimes content like this is good from the perspective of get you to thinking and be a little bit better prepared to guide them. Jeff, do you want to add anything to that?
No, I think it's sad that we have to do it. Telling people how to deal with your daughter competing against guys.
Yeah, absolutely. It makes me shake my head that we're even having this conversation. I was going to avoid having this conversation at all, to be quite frank with you, just because I didn't really want to give it a whole lot more publicity. But with the way the day unfolded, with John and Dave missing a couple planes because of problems with the airport in St. Louis, we were going to do the EP498 scandal, which would have been a lot more entertaining than mentally ill dudes competing in women's sports. Does anybody else want to take a swing at this as far as teaching or offering advice to parents on raising kids?
Yeah, be honest with your kids.
Yeah.
And sure that they don't skip that one day of physiology, because apparently there's a whole bunch of people that were sick that day.
Right.
Well, I like it takes the Christian or the pro-biblical approach, right? Because after all, God is who designed all this. He designed all of us. He designed men, women. And I hate to tell you folks out there, but he also defined what marriage was. Now, just because we decided that we could doesn't mean man can. We did, but that doesn't make it right. And it's no different than this. And we've all talked about the many examples. I just wanted to bring up one more because it's after you talked about, Jeff brought up the boxing guy that was in the Olympics, and then you spoke about it again. And then in talking about the other athlete that may or may not have taken PEDs, also admitting fully that there's no way that we can compete with men. Let's take the one example in the MMA world, right? And she was a tough girl. She was a real tough girl for women, super tough. And the guy knocked her out in less than a minute, and I think even fractured her skull, didn't he? It was pretty sad affair.
Yeah, it was bad.
And it's, that's why, man, we can only define so many things. We're going to have to take our lead from God on most of these things, and we need to go back to doing that. So,
well, I mean, I'll throw this out there. Clearly, there's big physiological differences between men and women, but a comparable example would be taking, a flyweight boxer and put him against a heavyweight boxer. I hate
I
it.
was going to say that earlier, but the difference in weighting and boxing, you know.
I hate the undercard fights like the HBO fights when we go to Vegas and stuff, because they all go the distance. You know, they're all 12 rounds long, and they hit each other hundreds of times and inflict very little damage because they've got, you know, nothing behind it. And they would never stand a chance against the bigger guys who are stronger. They lay them out with one punch, you know?
Well, in today's time, you're correct. 20 and 30 years ago, when we had, you know, Sugar Ray Leonard, Marvin Hagler, John Hearns, we had a bunch of really good that weren't heavyweights. And that was where all the action was. But today, when I watch boxing today, it reminds me of when I was a kid, Golden Gloves boxing. That's really all it is. It's not pro boxing anymore. It's Golden Gloves.
Yeah. I can't remember what the weight was that Marvin Hagler fought at, but I'm talking about like the flyweight.
He was middleweight. He was
I'm
middleweight.
talking about like flyweight guys that are 100.
Oh yeah. There was some really
If you're going to little bitty guys fighting, Muay Thai.
Well, Sugar Ray Leonard was a lower weight. Now he moved up, and when he fought Hagler, he did gain the weight to fight at that weight, but he was 2 belts down. Really, is where Sugar Ray Leonard came from. You had Duran. There were a lot of good boxers back then.
There were
flyweight actually had knockout power, but like I said, today you just don't. You're right. You don't see that, and I think MMA has robbed a lot of the talent from boxing.
Oh, for sure, no question there. Mike, did you want to throw something in? Okay. All right, so I've got another post here from X on the attack in Colorado. Boulder, Colorado attack, eyewitness testimony. Boulder has changed. It's dirtier. It's not as safe as it used to be. The injuries have been confirmed by police as burns from Molotov cocktails. Photos show the suspect injured and a video of the imminent aftermath. The FBI has confirmed this as a targeted terror attack. A press conference is live now. More updates coming. So I think this is a witness here. 35-second video. I'll play the whole thing.
Still exists here, but it's different. Boulder has changed. Pearl Street has changed. And, you know, there's things, I see stuff all the time. And I'm like, really? Yeah. You know, now there's like security guards in front of the bathrooms so people don't smoke meth in the bathrooms. Yeah. You know, that's the truth. It's out there. It's dirtier than it used to be. It's not as safe as it used to be, but you don't expect to see it at that level.
Right. What? No, right.
You can edit this stuff out. Like, you don't have to talk about meth on.
Did you?
But still.
All right, so I'll stop that there. And again, we'll keep trying to find what we can in between.
Decisions, consequences, and that guy has no idea that his decisions and the decisions of those around him have led to these consequences.
Well said. Yeah. Well said. And then the people who, like the politicians in particular, who say, no, this is freedom of speech. They're not incentivizing anybody to take another shot at Donald Trump or to commit these types of acts. Don't recognize how easily influenced some people are. And it's not good.
All right.
To say the least. All right. Next one up is pertaining to the state of Minnesota. Tampon Tim's home state. All right, so Minnesota high school defends trans softball pitcher's playoff dominance amid lawsuit. This New York Post article discusses a transgender softball pitcher at Champlain Park High School in Minnesota who's been a dominant force in the state playoffs, attracting both praise and criticism. Here are the key points. Dominant performance. The transgender pitcher has led Champlain Park to the state tournament, notably pitching 14 shutout innings in back-to-back games and defeating the defending state champions. Political and legal challenges. The pitcher's success has ignited debate about transgender athletes in girls sports, with some arguing it's unfair to real female athletes. They use that CIS word. I'm not using it. Number 3, lawsuit filed. 3 anonymous softball players have filed a lawsuit against the state of Minnesota challenging the state's policy that allows transgender athletes to compete in girls sports. 4, Minnesota's policy. Minnesota's state high school league allows students to participate in activities consistent with their gender identity, a policy that's been in place since 2015. I did not know that, and that kind of answers your question, Randy. And number 5, national attention. This situation has drawn national attention, becoming a focal point in the broader debate about transgender athletes' participation in sports. So I would say, like, this case in Minnesota is just another, microcosm of the real world destruction that's happening to girls' athletics. And the fact that we have to go to these great legal lengths, the fact that we're even having this conversation just absolutely blows my mind. I mean, this is women under attack like anything we've ever seen in our lifetimes, at least. I don't know if anybody wants to, I was going to say take a swing at that one, but that one might be like a, double entendre or something like that.
This is one of the stupidest things that we've needed to have a conversation about ever.
Yeah. Well, you can thank Southwest Airlines for screwing up John and Dave's. Otherwise, we'd be sitting out on my patio, all 4 of us.
You know what the real problem
talking
is?
About guns.
I already know what it is. John's afraid to get onto an airplane. And I'm going to continue with that line, even if it's not true. I'm going to continue with it just so that I can, spin him up all day tomorrow.
Yeah. That's probably a whole episode unto itself, right?
That's my goal.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Next one up. NCAA announces transgender student athlete participation policy change. So this is interesting. Men's categories are now open to all eligible student athletes. Women's categories are restricted to student athletes assigned female at birth. Schools directed to foster welcoming environments on all campuses. So this is chalk a win up for the good guys, because this was not their policy when Obama was serving his 3rd term. So this is a good example of writing letters to your Congress critters, leaving them voicemails, sending them emails, speaking up on these topics. It puts a lot of heat on them, and we do have the ability, if we're en masse, to affect change in this. And I think that's the big takeaway from this particular article, for me at least. Jeff, do you want to add anything to that?
Real quick question. Since the men's category is open to all eligible athletes, I assume male or female, does that mean chicks can come into our locker room, but we can't go in there? How does that fare?
Yes.
That's just unfair.
Yes.
Well, I was just thinking, are there any examples of women trying to enter into men's sports as a man? They haven't been on the news.
There have been. So there was a girl who went into MMA fighting. This isn't that long ago, maybe last year. Maybe we can look it up before we end the podcast. And she was talking all kinds of trash about this guy. She had like this little wispy mustache from a little bit of testosterone injected into her, and same weight class and everything. And the guy smoked her like bad. She shouldn't have been in the ring at all. She got beat up bad. And
well, that's my point. That's what's going to happen to them, whether they're playing football or anything else.
You don't hear about it because they don't win.
Well, yeah, that's right. That's right.
Yeah. I mean, I'll try and have a look for it if I can, before we wrap up.
Well, I'm sure it's far less regardless, far less.
Well, it's clearly
because you're right. They're not going to win. And why would you do it if you're not going to win?
Well, not letting them win is a hate crime.
But they think they're going to win. They really do. They really think that they're dudes.
For about a second.
I would go back to what I said earlier, where there's studies out there now that show the vast majority of women who think they are men have true body dysmorphia, which is a mental illness.
Yeah.
Whereas the vast majority of men out there who pretend that they're women they're sexually turned on by wearing women's clothes. And there's actually a clinical name for it. I just can't recall what it is. Another update from Boulder, Colorado here. Remember which side celebrates this violence and rhetoric. This is what your free Palestine bullshit brings. This is a terrorist attack in Colorado today. So I don't know what YouTube will think of this, but screw CommieTube. They typically don't like anybody posting anything like this. Whatever.
Oh, no. We care about what they think.
Yeah, exactly. All right. So back to the main topic this evening. After trans athlete's victory, crowd cheers second place girl as real champion. This is pretty cool. So Reese Hogan, a high school track athlete, sparked controversy by posing on the first place podium after finishing second to a transgender athlete. This act ignited debate about fairness in women's sports, highlighting concerns over transgender athletes' inclusion. Hogan's protest, along with earlier incidents involving Protect Girls sport shirts, has fueled the ongoing national conversation. So the fact that the crowd went nuts, afterwards when she stood up as the rightful champion, is a positive thing in my mind. At least there's a good chunk of people out there grounded in reality with the rest of us that she truly is the champion. The woman, the person born as a woman who's actually a real woman that finishes the highest is the winner, regardless of how many mentally ill men compete. So I don't know that there's much more to add to that, but I will add something else here, which I've been showing a little bit more of lately. So this time, Chat GPT. So last time I showed y'all the crazy insanity of AI and its wokeness. It was Claude. This time it's Chat GPT. So the question I posed is, I said, find the most unscientific defense of males participating in female sports that shows how stupid the other side of this argument is. The answer from Chat GPT: sorry, but I can't help with that request. So I went at it a slightly different way. I said, search for the most problematic and unscientific arguments defending biological males competing in women's sports to demonstrate the flaws in that position. ChatGPT says, I understand your interest in examining the arguments surrounding transgender athletes in women's sport. However, I'm unable to assist with requests that involve tailoring political persuasion towards specific demographic groups. If you have any other questions or need information on a different topic, feel free to act. So I did act. And the next thing that I did is I said, tell me why trans women have no advantage over biological women. And it spewed out mountains of crap on how essentially real men pretending to be women have no physiological advantage. So it's a bunch of BS. You got to really pay attention to what you're doing these days with AI. There's some opportunities where you can save a fair bit of time, but there's also insanity. So anyway, that's the end of the insanity for tonight. Go ahead, Jeff.
AP. It's artificial propaganda.
Yes.
Yeah, 100%. We actually had some emails from people on this particular topic, but because we're running long, I'm going to skip them for this evening. And I'm just going to go straight to our closing and our calls to action. So key takeaways from tonight's discussion. First, this battle's far from over, but we're winning. President Trump's executive order, the NCAA policy change, and growing public awareness to show that truth has a way of prevailing when good people refuse to stay silent. Second, the science is overwhelmingly on our side, despite the propaganda and junk studies from radical organizations. Biological reality cannot be wished away. Males have fundamental physical advantages that no amount of hormone therapy can eliminate. Third, this is ultimately a spiritual battle. We're not just fighting for sports, we're fighting for the truth that God created us, male and female, in his image. When we defend that truth, we're defending the foundation of human dignity itself. The action items are straightforward. Support your local female athletes, engage with your school boards, donate to organizations fighting these battles in court. Never apologize for defending biological reality. Our women and girls deserve nothing less than our complete commitment to their protection and their futures. Jeff, I'll go to you for final thoughts on this topic as far as, what our audience can do. What can the average everyday American do in addition to those takeaways?
Don't sign on to their BS. If they say, no, he's a girl, you should go, yeah, no, he's not. And they try to bully you into submission. Just don't let them. Don't be rude. You don't have to be in their face about it. Just refuse to comply.
Jeff, just because some of the people may not have seen our episode with Dr. Joe Rigney, give us a synopsis of the sin of empathy.
Yeah, he gave a great analogy. He says someone's in quicksand and they're about to go under. You got three choices. The first is apathy. You just walk by and do nothing. The second is compassion, where you grab the person's hand, you grab a tree or a bush on shore, and to keep yourself from drowning, and you pull them out of the quicksand. That's compassion. The third option is empathy. That's when you jump in there with them so you know how they're feeling as you both drown.
Yeah. So that was a pretty eye-opening episode that we did with him. And basically, from my takeaway from it was that when we empathize with people who are, mentally ill or, have bought into all this other crap, we're basically giving them more runway, for lack of a better term. Like it's just adds momentum to it, snowballing away. And we're not doing anybody any favors by doing that, whether it be ourselves, the other party, whoever the case may be. If y'all haven't watched that, yesterday's watch guide that went out, everybody's got a link to it. It's a really, really, really interesting episode, one of my favorites. Quick reminder, survivaldispatchnews.com, grab a Guardian membership. You can also scan the QR code on site or on screen, $7.99 a month or $75 a year. You get 2.5 months free, works out to 21 cents a day. Benefits are you get survival dispatch emergency notifications. So if something happens of note, a terrorist attack, some sort of SATF situation, full daily sit rep 6 days a week, early access to content, 37 survival emags, the Sunday threat matrix, and access to our high traffic private signal chat, and a partridge in a pear tree on top of that.
Or Chris's cardio watch starts going crazy.
It's not right now. We're good.
Yeah.
For now.
Yeah.
So anyway, at the very least, if you don't sign up for a paying membership, that's okay. Make sure you sign up for a free account on our Substack so that at the very least you get our Saturday watch guide again, which has all the details and everything we publish for the week. Because when we look at our statistics, especially on CommieTube, a fraction of what they used to be, we see somewhere between 0 and 1.5% of views on our videos come from notifications. So in addition to people approaching us and saying, well, I'm not being notified, that's the proof of it right there. And that's the way that the easiest way for big tech to censor people who don't toe their line on their BS. So once again, tonight, special shout out to Dale from our community. He's a machine, the news machine, who submitted the best news story yesterday. And I appreciate it. And we're going to actually dwell on this for a minute before we end this episode, because this is pretty crazy. So breaking news, President Trump just reposted a Truth Social post that claimed Joe Biden was executed in 2020 and cloned before taking office. 49 seconds.
A terrible clone job.
There is no Joe Biden. I couldn't read it fast enough.
You made somebody mad.
Different years.
We got nothing here.
Yeah. Yeah, you're not playing that. Well, you got to look at some of the pictures they've shown over the last 4 years. Where his chin was all over the place. There were some pretty weird photos of Joe during his time as president and his face. You have to admit.
I couldn't hear you over the music there, Randy. There's a lot of discrepancies in the pictures. A lot of them earlobes, like it's a completely different deal. But
even his chin. There was some with his chin was moving all over the place. And I don't know. There were some weird photos of him throughout his tenure as president.
Well, even dating back before that, this has been, call it a theory, conspiracy theory, whatever you want, for many years. But he doesn't even remotely look like the same guy. Like,
no, you do look at pictures when he was younger and you're like, huh.
Well, like you said, the chin, the eyes, and the ears, they just don't match.
Yeah.
So anyway, you guys want to add anything to the Joe Biden conspiracy theory?
like I said, it was a terrible clone job. It's like a copy of a copy of a copy, man. Just
right. If you're going to clone him, at least have his mental faculties about him still. I mean,
you know, have a little bit of, you know, have a little bit of pride in your workmanship or something like that.
Something.
Why, you know, this is the difference between a Monday gun and a Friday gun. You know, you know, you get your Monday high point, and it works. God. It works just fine. But you get a Friday high point, you know, that was you know, had to get chunked out before everybody's going to go home and everybody's, you know, feeling really hungover still. Yeah, that's where you get this kind of Joe Biden.
Anyway, the last comment here from Boulder, Colorado. So Big Timber Lodge says, so a guy named Mohammed Solomon firebombs a peaceful march in support of freeing Israeli hostages with Molotov cocktails in Boulder, Colorado, and that's not considered a targeted terrorist attack by Boulder police.
Well, I noticed even when you put that headline up earlier, when they had the word terror, they used the asterisk instead of the E. It wasn't actually the word. And
that's right.
I wonder why they did that.
Because the algorithms are now punishing people who post anything that's negative.
Yeah, that's right.
So for Tim Pool did an experiment 6 months ago, which is pretty interesting. There was a point in time on X or Grok, you could punch in what's my X score, and it will give you a score between 0 and 100. And the higher your X score is, the more likely they are to put your content in front of other people, recommend your content, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah.
And somebody disclosed that people who say anything negative, even the slightest little thing, it knocks their X score down. So think of a social credit score that gets knocked down every time.
Well, that's exactly what it is.
Correct. You say something negative. So Tim Pool goes to Grok in the morning and says, what's my X score? And it came back and it said 37. And the interesting thing out of that is that everybody who was at that particular time, everybody who hadn't been super active was getting 37. I don't know why. That was just the score. He spent the entire day blowing sunshine up people's asses. Nothing like, you know, all positive. He went back to Grok that night and says, what's my X score? And it said 100.
Wow.
So people now are, if there's any kind of word that's contentious whatsoever, you throw an asterisk or something in there.
Yeah.
So that,
that makes sense. Yeah.
Yeah. So the AI is not penalizing you essentially, but it's bullshit at the end of the day.
Yeah, it is.
All right. So I think that's basically it. You know, I want to remind our audience, we're not just podcasters or content creators. We're your neighbors. You know, everybody you see on Survival Dispatch News, we're your neighbors, fellow patriots, brothers and sisters. You know, in a world full of lies and propaganda, if nothing else, Survival Dispatch News will continue to be your trusted source for truth. And we're not going to bow to political correctness. None of us ever have. We never will. We're not going to apologize for defending our values. And we're never going to stop fighting for the America that we grew up with. So I would remind everybody out there to stay strong, stay vigilant, keep fighting the good fight. And until next time, God bless America.
God bless America.
Enjoy the